Jenna, and today I'm here doing my wrap up for the Biannual Bibliothon Winter 2018. I actually did surprisingly okay this bibliothon. It's something that I was not expecting. So during the week I managed to read 3.5 books and also start another book. I did kind of towards the end of the week, I decided to be a little bit of a Biannual Bibliothon rebel, and I changed from my TBR and I deviated away from the challenges because as much as I wanted to read the books that were on my TBR, I unfortunately have a lot of other books that I really need to get read. So I kind of went, I'll still use the readathon as a way to really push myself to read more, but I just won't be participating in the rest of the challenges. So because I didn't participate in 2 of the challenges, it means that I did not get to read Otherworld by Jason Segel and Kristen Miller, and I also did not get to read Spellcaster by Claudia Gray. So these books were covering challenge number 1, which was to read a group book, and challenge number something, which was to read a book that you'd never heard of before. So I didn't get to participate in either of these challenges, which is a little bit sad because I do still want to get to these books at some point. I just had so many other things to read that week that I decided to become a rebel, put these ones down, deviate from my TBR, and not complete the challenges. So the first book that I did manage to finish for the Bibliothon was The Naughtiest Girl Again by Enid Blyton, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Follows a girl named Elizabeth Allen who, in this book particularly, she goes back to Whiteleaf School where the previous term she had been known as the naughtiest girl because she tried everything desperately to get sent home. And this book follows her and her friends as well as some new characters as they navigate, you know, all of the fun things that come with living in a boarding school. From the writing style and the subject matter, it's really easy to see that this book was definitely written back in, you know, like the 40s. It was you can tell the decade that it's written in just from some of the language that's used, some of the writing style, the actual subject matter itself, the fact that these kids go to boarding school and they've got tuck boxes and all these sorts of things. So you can definitely tell the decade that it's written in, but that doesn't make it any less fun and any less easy to get through. I absolutely adore Elizabeth. She has the most fiery temper, but it's something that you would come to expect from a girl like her, and her interactions with the other characters is just so honest and true, and it's one of the things that I love the most about this book. The plot is unbelievably simple, and sometimes it's difficult to remember that this book wasn't written by a 10-year-old, like it was written by an actual adult, and sometimes I'm just like, really? Because some of the things that they do is so juvenile. One of the things that I found really interesting about this book is that there were many different POV changes, and quite often it would happen just in the middle of a paragraph, but I was never confused and I always knew exactly who was talking. That doesn't happen often, especially when you have POV changes in the middle of paragraphs, but yeah, somehow I was able to follow the story. So I read this book in order to complete the challenge of reading a book under 200 pages. This one is only like 180 pages long, so it didn't take me long to get through, and I absolutely adored it, and I'm really glad that I read it again for the Bibliothon. The next book that I finished was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So this book completed the challenge to read a book about mental illness, and going into it I wasn't entirely sure what the mental illness was. So when you're reading this book, basically you are reading a bunch of letters that Charlie has written to someone who he calls his friend. So through that it was very personal, and I felt really invested in the story because it felt very much like Charlie was literally sending these letters to me and was telling me his life story, and it just made it really personal and made me really connect and fall in love with these characters. So what was happening to them was heartbreaking, and I was feeling it with every sense of myself, which is something that I really love in books. I love books that can involve you just completely in the story, and you can just fall in love with it, and you can completely forget what's going on in your own life because you're so focused on what's happening to these characters. One of the things I found really interesting about this book is that while the subject matter is really dark and depressing, I found that it was done in a way that made me feel kind of light and hopeful. So even though really terrible, gloomy, bleak things were happening, I could always see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I knew that everything was gonna be okay even though things didn't always work out in the characters' favors. And I think that's a really interesting thing that this book has done, is that while the subject matter is just so deep and dark, it has somehow made it so that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and even though things don't always turn out alright for the character, you know that it's going to be alright in the end. And I think that's something really interesting, and one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this book. Funnily enough, after I finished reading it, I then went and rewatched the movie, and I have to say the movie is nowhere near as good as the book. Like, the movie misses out on a lot of stuff, and I wasn't as happy with the movie. I definitely didn't feel as connected to the characters in the movie as I did in the book. So if you haven't yet, I highly recommend that you read this. The third book that I read was The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, which is the first book chronologically in the Chronicles of Narnia series. I say chronologically because it's technically the 6th book that was written, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Reading Magician's Nephew was like stepping back into my childhood. It was amazing. Oh my goodness. So basically, I read the Chronicles of Narnia back when I was like 10 years old, right before the first, like the new movie came out, Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe. wardrobe. So I read them all right before that came out, and I remember reading Magician's Nephew and not really understanding it, and it's taken me a lot of years to kind of read and understand this series on a very different level to what I read them as a kid. Let's put it this way. As a kid, I did not understand the last book. I did not understand how it ended. I didn't understand anything. It wasn't until I reread it a few years back that I went, oh, no, I get it now. So reading it this time around, I could definitely see all of the religious undertones of this book. It's not even trying to hide them. Like, it is there in plain view for you to find. And that's something I find really interesting, is that as a kid, especially a kid who didn't grow up in a religious household or anything, I didn't see any of that. But now I can see it, and I really appreciate it and love it. I love Aslan, and I love the characters that we meet in this one. Polly and Diggory are just the cutest little buttons. I really love them. The plot of this book is, there basically isn't a plot. This book is setting up for the rest of the series. That is all it is doing. It is literally just showing you how Narnia came to be, and that is something I think really unique and special that a lot of series don't do. They don't always go back and show you how something came to be, but I think it's a necessary addition to the series, especially because it's written as number 6, and then book number 7 and what happens in that was written straight afterwards. So I think it was definitely necessary in order to do a full circle story, which is what they've ended up doing. They needed to have written book number 6, and I loved it. So I read The Magician's Nephew as part of the challenge to read a book that has been mentioned in another book or TV show or movie or any other popular culture reference, basically. And once again, I have to say I kind of cheated a little bit because I'm just going from the Chronicles of Narnia, because that's mentioned in like everything, but I haven't actually ever heard Magician's Nephew be mentioned. So that was me being a rebel number 1. The last book that I read for the Bibliothon is actually one that I had already started. So I'd read half of it, and then I had to put the book down in order to start the Bibliothon so I could read these other books, which is one of the reasons why I decided to just drop everything, drop the other books I was meant to read, and just go back and read this one. And that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars, and obviously it doesn't cover any challenges because I was a rebel and read it even though I probably shouldn't have. I have to say I was not a huge fan of this book. I loved the way it started, thought it had a really explosive beginning, one that I was not expecting, like not expecting at all. And then it just went downhill from there. It dragged on, the plot was so boring, and don't get me started on the characters. Okay, I did not like a single character. Every single one of them was completely unlikable. Even our protagonist, she was so annoying. Hated everything about her. I hated any love interest that came of it. I hated all the characters. For me, I found the plot to be really boring, and even though it was meant to have like twists and turns, I found those twists and turns to be really predictable. So pretty much by the end of the story, I was just over it and I just wanted it to be done. So was not the biggest fan of this one. The only thing that I really did kind of enjoy was the fact that these fairies were dark fairies. Like, I love reading books about dark fairies, and this one definitely was, but there's something about it that I just didn't like. I'm also not a fan of Holly Black's writing style. I think she describes things really well, but to a point where I don't care about it anymore. Like, she'll be describing something and I'll be halfway through the description and I'll be like, I'm already bored. I just want to get on with the story. So wasn't a fan of the writing style, thought the plot was very predictable, and I hated pretty much every single one of the characters. So there we go, those are all of the books that I read for the Winter 2018 Biannual Bibliothon. I'm a little sad that I didn't get to participate in any of the video challenges this year, but once again, I had Grey Veil Week going on pretty much at the same time, so there was no way I was going to be able to do 2 full weeks of videos because of work and reading and just everything else in between. There's no way I could have gotten it done, but maybe for the summer 2018 Biannual Bibliothon I'll be able to make some videos. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below if you participated in the Bibliothon and what books you read. I would absolutely love to know. If you like this video, be sure to give it a huge thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing. Stay random. Bye.